Yes, London. Yeah, if you can hear me, we do apologize. We're just getting ready to go live with this interview, so we do apologize for that. It's the Breaking the Spell show. We do it each and every Thursday and Sunday. We are here to bring you the facts and only the facts here on the Breaking the Spell show. We must apologize for that slight interlude, slight misunderstanding in the studio. As promised on Sunday's show, and we've been pushing it out there, we've got the Ambassador Doosua York online, ready to go live with us, so we're just going to test the signal to make sure that everything's working. Ambassador, can you hear us?
Yes, I can, brother. I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, brilliant.
Okay, so we just need you to give a big shout out to London for us.
Okay, we are live. London, family over there. My heart goes out to the family. I've been trying to get there for the last few weeks, of course. We know that the Olympics has taken over all the flights and put things sky high. So hopefully I can see the family in a few weeks after the Olympics. But until then, we have this great media outlet, Breaking the Spell. So we're doing what we can do, and I'm here now, and I appreciate everyone tuning in and listening, and I'll do my best to answer any questions.
Right, most definitely. For those who don't know, and we're going to just introduce it properly, who we affectionately call the master teacher, Dr. Malachi Z.K. York, President York, has been incarcerated since 2002. I would prefer the ambassador to go through most of the finer details so he can give you in the most accurate way. One of these things that we as a people should be aware of and always strive to do is, support your own, as the DVD persecution of the righteous was just being played, and you heard the fact linking back to Martin Luther King, linking back to Malcolm X, saying that those who are pushing true righteous information out there, whether you agree with the doctrine or not, with the goodness in their heart, and they're pushing that information out there, those people tend to be always persecuted, and we have to be aware of this persecution. And in this case, they've now persecuted someone that is, in their own right, within their own jurisdiction, a sovereign. Someone from a sovereign nation, and this is what the ambassador is here to explain. But I'll let him take the lead to explain himself and explain the works that he's been doing on behalf of the United Nuapia Nation. Ambassador, please explain what's happened in the past and what's taking place now.
Well, there's quite a bit of progress in our nation. Of course, the ultimate goal is to free Pamumkak, Pamam, Bananu, or Banan, Ahtab, which is our chief Black Thunderbird Eagle, Excellency Dr. Malachi Z.K. York. And, of course, we want to make sure that we give a shout-out to our president and make sure we let him know that we love him here in the UK, in Canada, in Trinidad, and in London, and Barbados, Jamaica, all over. And we are fighting for him. We are fighting for our freedom. And with that, it comes at a serious cost. It comes at putting a lot on the line when you say that you are a sovereign nation. When you acknowledge your independence and you acknowledge your statehood, you acknowledge that you are a sovereign and a part of a sovereign nation, and acknowledging that we were here before any of the settlements of the colonialism of the Europeans coming to this country, and in a lot of indigenous lands. At this year, particularly 2012. Since from 2012, from about maybe the early to late 80s, there's been a lot of talk about the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And that just recently has been in full-fledged as far as acceptance in the United Nations. In 2007, they adopted the Declaration. And of course, which we've always acknowledged, our master teacher, Dr. Malachi York, has always stated that we were the indigenous people on this land prior to anyone setting up a government. We had governments, we have a culture, we have a language, we had systems set up that work with us and we work with it. And we accepted that culture. We acknowledge our spiritual practice and passed it on from generation to generation. So the atrocities that's been committed against us as a nation, from the past until the present, is what this fight is all about. The kidnapping of chiefs and killing of our family members just to confiscate lands and to ultimately to try to destroy our culture and transferring our children and our women to other areas for our beautiful land, which was a part of the plot. And it has been a pattern around the world, so we saying at this point the Nuwapian Nation has national land, our indigenous 476 acres, known as Wani, and our Tama, and live, and still live. And so a lot of these facts we have to forth to the world as we've always done. We've always been, our doctrine teaches to be pioneers of facts and let the justice in the name of freedom. So that's what we are. And of course, when you step up and say these things, then you're going to be attacked. And, our position right now, the master teaches freedom as all Nuwapians should be. And of course, we appreciate this is a media outlet to bring to the world bring to the consciousness of the world of the torture that's taken.
Can you hear me, Ambassador?
Yes.
Sorry, we perhaps due to the internet connectivity, we went in and out there. But if you can hear me, we do apologize to the listeners for that. So, please continue. We just lost you for a second.
Okay. So I was saying that the indigenous, the rights of indigenous people. Indigenous means of origin, originating. We did originate wherever Nuwapians, dark skinned Nagaru are. We originate insofar as we've traveled across the planet, we've moved, we migrated, we navigated into lands that were inhabited by us, and we met our people there. In the case of Native Americans, there's a lot of misconception in history that all blacks in the U.S. or in the Caribbean and in London as well, in the UK and other places, that we were brought there in a slave trade or what have you, but that's not always the case. Most of the time, if you really look into the origins of the people of the land, you'll find out that they are Nagaru, and we were the indigenous, as in this case here in the United States with the Native Americans, which our master teacher is stemmed from on his bloodline as a bloodline of York and being native of this land. And of course, we know that, there's a lot of questions surrounding that with his bloodline and his seed, his connection to Ghana, West Africa, and his connection to North America and the indigenous Yamasee, which means gentle people. So there's a lot of clearing of the facts that has to be done, which my job is to do, and I don't have a problem with it. And I take whatever persecution that comes with it, because we stand up, we stand for facts, we stand for truth, and it's a pleasure to be in this fight. It's a pleasure to be on the front line for this fight, because it means a lot to our ancestors. It means a lot to our present day Nuwapians who are in the fight and have been fighting. So, of course, it's my honor and it's my pleasure. I'm not at all shifted by the what's being said. I address it all, and that's why I'm here.
Most definitely. And we definitely do appreciate all the hard work and efforts that is being put into this push. One of the things that I want to do within this interview, I want to start from the top. And in relation to starting from the top, I'm talking from both aspects in relation to the kidnapping of Dr. York, for lack of a better word, as well as the top in relation to sovereign, how the sovereign nation principle works. As in, I want to go back to a historical part. If we start first and foremost with the sovereignty, so that our listeners out there, someone that's hearing this for the first time, saying, what is sovereignty? And how does it work? And how is it we, as for lack of a better word, we as black folks, we can start saying that we're sovereign to anywhere apart from Africa? We want to explain to them the migrational path of how these things work in terms of the Olmecs, those who migrated out of Africa to set up a civilization in the Americas, so that there's a greater understanding first and foremost by our listeners, so that they can start to understand what was claimed and what was being pushed, and where we were offended so greatly by what was done when Dr. Malachi York was kidnapped, or President York was kidnapped.
Okay. Basically, when you deal with sovereignty, and a sovereign state, and I'm glad you stopped me, because I can get quite lengthy. So by all means, if I'm talking, I can't see you, but just stop me in the middle of what I'm saying, because I'll just keep going. So
no
I
problem.
Just want you to know that. But, okay,
we're here with you. Don't worry.
When you're dealing with sovereignty, you're dealing with a supreme independent authority. You're dealing with a permanent population, a government, a group, and when you're dealing with indigenous, you're dealing with indigenous people of that land. So if you have a working system and a culture, and a system set up where you have a chief, a miku or maku, which here in this nation, before the U.S. set up their government here and we allowed the settlers here, we had sovereign status, and we still have retained our sovereign status. Your sovereignty can't be relinquished. You cannot relinquish it to anyone. No one can take your sovereignty. You have to give it up, which the Yamasee never is. It was hundreds of Native American tribes. But if you look into the Yamasee, which is gentle people, you look into their description in the congressional records here all throughout the South and in Washington, D.C., they've always described the Yamasee as dark-skinned peoples who never assimilated. The reason why they attempted to remove the Yamasee out of Native American stories is because that we did not assimilate. We did not mix our seed. We went into hiding. In fact, it's a known fact that the Yamasee mixed in with the African tribes that the Africans slaves who were brought over here to avoid assimilation.
So let's understand this. What you're saying, so that the listeners are following. What you're saying, that in America there were many Native American tribes that were indigenous, that were there before the Europeans came to America, before Columbus, then, for lack of a better word.
Absolutely.
And one of these tribes, being called the Yamasee, is described on record as being dark-skinned. Is it woolly-haired as well?
They're described as dark-skinned, woolly hair. In fact, at a commission's hearing in about 1870, there's a group of Europeans who put on record that they were actually African Indians. So the thing what made the Yamasee to them and to most Native American tribes is that the Yamasee, they considered Africans and Indians. They made the two characterization. They said one African slave is worth 10 Indian slaves. Right. So they said, wow, let's just get an African Indian, or the Yamasee, that they actually captured, and they used them as an experimental tribe and took them to the islands. A lot of people don't know that. They actually kidnapped Yamasee and took them to the islands. So they are on record as dark skin.
So when you say taken to the island, you're talking about to the Caribbeans, you're talking about to Trinidad, to Barbados, to Jamaica.
They took them there.
All right.
So we are related to our Nuwapians out there by blood.
So by definition, when we say Jamaicans, Trinidadians, Barbadians, Grenadans, we're talking about we still link back to these Native American tribes by blood, for the fact that they were taken under this principle and under this experiment also to the Caribbean.
Absolutely. And they know that. The problem, I just spoke to our father yesterday, and he said the problem is that they're so busy trying to stop Liberia. They were so busy trying to stop Ghana, trying to stop Africa, the African effort, that they had no idea they had a Native American chief inside. And now they're all over the place. They didn't even pay attention to their own backyard. Those are his words.
Right.
So,
right.
so
Most definitely. And you know, one of the things that I want to keep hammering out there to the listeners listening today, what we're saying again, you know, before Columbus, so before Europeans settled in the Americas, there were tribes in the Americas, one on record being the Yamasee, that was dark-skinned, woolly hair, or African Indians, as they would want to call them. But the reason they call them Indians is not because of what you characteristically see as an Indian. Just like how an African is called a West Indian today, they're still Africans. It doesn't mean Indian in features or characteristics. It just means Indian because, as you know, Columbus was looking for the West Indies. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, he actually was looking for India.
That's right. That's what I should say. He was looking for the East Indies.
Right, East India, exactly. So you're absolutely correct. But you have to understand that the Yamasee mixed in, and when the Yamasee mixed in with there were other, say, dark-skinned tribes like the Seminole. The Seminole were there. The Washita were there. You had the Washita as well. You had which was a part of the Creek nations, or the Creek Confederacy, when these other nations who lived, all they did was live up and down the creek. That's how they would receive their names. The names were not names from us. These are names that was given by the European when they saw the actions of these indigenous people. And these indigenous people may have lived by the creeks, or they may have they walked up to a specific tribe or met a tribe, and this tribe had a nose pierced. Their nose is pierced. So they say, okay, these are the Nez Perce, or the Nez Perce, and then these tribes will say, okay, yes, that's what we are. Well, of course, in their native tongue. So this was it was never the name that the indigenous people had for themselves. We never really told them the names of what and who we are. We never really gave them our secrets. The same Yamasee that fought the British, the Yamasee was responsible for fighting the British and the Portuguese, the Spanish, in South Carolina, Florida, North Carolina, and Alabama and Georgia. The Yamasee War happened from 1715 to about 1718. So they actually fought against the British. It's the same bloodline that came out of Sudan that migrated south over into West Africa, and that same seed is of the blood family. And the same seed is over here in the eastern coast, or the eastern tribe. So they were all the same people. They were indeed sovereign. They had their own chiefs, where the United States, the penal system, the judicial system, and the police and the sheriff, where they used to work from establishment of the Native Americans and their cultural practices, their governmental bodies. So they had even adopted the practices of Native Americans, the indigenous sovereign people, and use it in their government. So they acknowledge our existence, they acknowledge our sovereignty, and they know that we own this land, and they're trying their best to keep that out of the hearts and minds of the people. So of course, our father, our teacher, our Meku, he knows how to trap the devil. They know who he is, but they didn't anticipate the angle in which he would come with the fight, and that's the whole Chesedek and Moses story, the new that's out now.
Okay, before that story, two questions I'd like to ask you. First thing is, how is the master teacher? As you said, you just had an update from him, so you know that all of London would like to know. And the other question is, what can the family here in London do, as the tribes that you mentioned, the Yamasee, the Seminole, Runaway, the Washita, the Mound Builders, the Nez Perce, all these tribes, or indigenous tribes, are based in America. So what can the family here in London do? Because a lot of that is going to be new to, especially the newcomers and those new listeners who are hearing us for the first time today. What can we do to help and expedite that case? As I watched the email that came out yesterday on C-SPAN about the recognition of indigenous or tribes within America. I don't know if you have a chance to watch that yourself. I watched it late last night. So if you could just, expand on that, let us know what we can do here so we can all work as a team and we're all on the same page.
Well, there's a lot you can do. There's a lot the family can do, and I know there's a lot of inquiries around it. Well, first, let me tell you, he's doing his best. I mean, he's doing his best. He knows this is a good fight. He knows what he's doing. I mean, let's just make that clear. He's not the master. You cannot become less than who you are, and he's sharp as a tack. He's always been and always will. And as long as we fight the good fight and follow in his footsteps to do what he says, we can fight alongside of him to defeat this beast, and we can defeat him. And so, with that being said, as long as there's progress and the nation has stood up, and the ledgers have been signed, he's put emphasis on the ledgers. We have to have those ledgers in so we can log it in our document, our governmental loggings here in the U.S. where his office is, his executive office, anything that comes from WUNW Radio, which is a way that a lot of people can tune in. I don't know if anyone received the emails, but we try to update the family on that station, UNN Radio, which has been converted to. So to educate our people and bring them up to speed, that's a media outlet that I open up the airways to. So to give our people what they need and bring them up to date and let them know how they can assist. Typically, it's just the support. As we follow what he's saying, what our Maku is saying, as far as the ledgers and staying in tune as one, and realize that y'all are indigenous as well. I'm sure everyone knows that the indigenous natives up in that area, the original were Nubians, were Nuwapian, and we all are indigenous to whatever land that we come out of.
Most definitely, and I want to highlight that again and recap that point and drum it home. When we talk about these people, when we talk about these Native Americans, these are people that migrated out of the Sudan in Africa, as the ambassador said, and this is the same tribe or family as when you talk about those from West Africa, your Akan, your Ashantis. It's going back into the same set of people, the same people. These people were also taken or also were brought to the Caribbeans, and likewise we migrated from the Caribbeans to the UK. So when we talk about sovereignty and getting this onto paper and get it recorded, it's not solely for those in America. It's not solely for those in the Caribbean. It's for every single person of that bloodline by characteristics and definition.
Exactly. And we've reclaimed our right under our selected constitutionally seated chief. That's what we constitutionally seated him in 1992. June 26th was the acceptance of our Constitution. We've accepted and retained our sovereignty then, and with that, we have a right to our own government, our own independence. We have a right to be self-determined and practice any culture that we deem fit that's acceptable to our people, and we have a right to protect our spiritual practices and our resources and our territories. And even in international law, which is a whole nother aspect of our direction and where we're going outside of the jurisdiction of the court, which we've had such a hard time, but we laid the paper trail, which is something that our chief wanted. And that's why we took a lot of time to go into their court systems and put the torture suits in, to lay out claims against the U.S. in the name of the Yamasee and them acknowledging him as a chief. So we took the time to do that. So we're taking it to the international level now. And in the international level, in international law, as a state, as a nation, you do have the right, even before recognition. And this is something that we have to remember. In international law, statehood, nationhood, independence as a tribe does not merit, does not have to come with recognition, meaning you do not have to be recognized. And a lot of people say that. So are we recognized by the international community? That's not a criteria for independence. It's not a criteria for sovereignty, because sovereignty starts from within. You're saying that you're the supreme authority. No one's laws, no one's legislation, no one's government has authority over you. And as a nation of 30,000, we have the ability to make that claim. We have made that claim, and we are in that position now. All it takes is us to move forward and make sure they open the door to let our sovereign immunity from any prosecution, from any government chief out of prison. Because by right, we have a right to have our president in our nation. No one can take that right from you. In fact, if you look around the world, international community, they won't arrest any head of state, because the international community acknowledges that that is a gross violation of international law. Even though they may see a head of state commit atrocities against humanity, they may see them suppressing the people, they cannot infringe upon the government seating of a president. The same with us. We have that same right. In fact, in international law, there's a statement that says no small country or nation is any less equal than a great kingdom. And that goes for any nation on the planet, in which we are amongst the original indigenous nations and governments that existed before 1776.
Most definitely. I'm going to come back to the issue of sovereignty, but I want to tie in first with the president, with President York, before I come back to sovereignty on its own. In that sense, was it not declared from the very get-go of this kidnapping that he was a sovereign nation? And if so, why did authorities choose to ignore this? I mean, can you explain some of the historical things, recent history, because it's only about 10 years ago, why did they choose to supersede and just incarcerate someone who, by definition, is of a sovereign nation?
They know who he is. They knew that where we were going with it, as he said, with all the 30,000 people who are part of our nation, and it is a part of our nation, and the direction we were growing tremendously. We're growing at such a fast rate that they had to do whatever it took to get him off the street. And you have to know the dynamics of the demographics of the areas in which he was incarcerated. Of course, down here in Edenton, in Georgia, where native indigenous, the tribes existed, the Yamasee, Georgia was a known state it's a state known for going out its way to confiscate indigenous land. In fact, anyone can look up the Trail of Tears. They'll know that it started in Georgia. You follow that? So that Trail of Tears was a 1,000-mile trail from Georgia until the west of the Mississippi, where they relocated thousands of Native Americans. And it was all because Georgia didn't acknowledge the fact that the federal government said that sovereign immunity exists amongst the governments of indigenous people. And the federal government has acknowledged that they have no jurisdiction over sovereign states or sovereign indigenous governments of the Native Americans. So the history of Georgia goes back to 1500s. And the Yamasee has a rich, strong, deep-rooted rooted seat here, because this is the land that we owned since thousands of years, actually, because Rock Eagle Mound is several thousands of years old. Rock Eagle Mound is the mound that is close to about 60 minutes from Eden, actually less than that, 60 miles from our land, Wahani. And you see it on the pictures of with our chief, the eagle. You can see it from the sky view. Where that eagle is a Rock Eagle Mound. It was built about 2,000 years ago. So that's why we relocated here from upstate. So he said it on the record. He said it on June 30th, 2003, when he stated in front of Judge Hugh Lawson that he was a part of a sovereign indigenous nation, and that he is acknowledged by the government, and that they had no jurisdiction over him, and that he was being tortured, and they totally ignored it. The reason why they ignored it, they looked at him, oh, he's nothing but a black man. wrote a few books. They didn't do their homework because their whole thing was based on racism and discrimination. So they didn't even weigh the fact that this man possibly may be telling the truth. It's possible we are indigenous nation. It's possible they've never seen the likes of anyone, any black person in this country or around the world. Well, it's typically this country, come forth and organize a group of people, namely Nuwapians ourselves, to do and to stand up and do right by our own people. And we were not on a revolutionary movement. We were not talking about going against the government. We'll be fools to say we're going against the government physically. But to establish our sovereignty was something that he placed on record, and he knew that eventually it would come to light again, and that we would be the ones to fight on that behalf. And he put it on record several times. He put it on record in 2004. He put it on record when he was incarcerated. He told the arresting officers who he was. He placed it in motions. He placed it in the mail. They knew it in the mail. Even their government acknowledged it. They just totally ignored it, like they ignored everything else. But the facts are here, and they can't ignore this one. There's no getting away around it. In fact, the Human Rights in the United Nations has just sent us a letter and saying they're looking into this situation very, very closely. They've acknowledged our they call it an intervention, which we gave them, right? When we went into Switzerland about 2 weeks ago, we put it on record to the world that our president was being tortured, and now they know. So
before we run away with and the audience don't quite understand, so what you're saying is that now, I mean, listening to one of your breakdowns recently, so that I can catch the listeners up and save you from repeating too much stuff all the time. You mentioned that it was attempted by the nation to go through the route in front of them within the U.S. and their laws, even though these factors were listed at each stage, that he was a sovereign nation, and that in a sense, they refused to release him on every ground and every opportunity in that sense. So the fact that the nation is left with no option but to take it to the forefront of the international proceedings. When was it first taken to the United Nations? When was the United Nations first made aware of this?
Well, actually, they were first made aware of it through James Anaya, who is the Special Rapporteur for Indigenous People. He was appointed by the UN, the United States, the Human Rights Council, several years ago. And it was brought to their attention, matter of fact, just recently in like May or June, where it was brought to this attention. And mind you, the good fight that our father is talking about just recently came to the forefront. And a lot of people, that's why a lot of people are puzzled. And they're like, well, where did this come from? Why is it didn't just pop up. And we want to make that clear as well. It didn't something that just didn't pop up. It's always been there. But the problem is we had people, of course, who were involved in our nation, who were planted there. And people know this around the world. And we want to make sure that we set the record straight with that, who were attempting to sabotage different aspects of his fight. And, it's a war. This is not something that is like, okay, they locked up a person and we're trying to get him out. No, this is a situation where this is a war of a bloodline of long history of reptilian descendants on this planet who do not want to give up their rulership. And they know that the freedom of our people is imminent. And I mean, is matter of fact, when you say the freedom of our people, you're saying the end of his rule. And they know that. So they know that there's only one being that can accomplish that, the freedom of us. So it's deeper than just we're a freedom fight. It's a little paperwork. The governmental bodies know. The whole world knows. And so with that being said, him putting it on record and backing off of it and then saying now come forward with it and now go into the international community, they were put on notice several weeks ago, but the actual application was placed in May 14th. It was put in the international courts. And so now we're going back and forth with them because of the unprecedented part of this case, meaning that no indigenous nation has ever come forth to bring a case against the nation or the government in which they that suppressed them. This is the first time this has happened. So of course it took them by surprise, because we're saying that no, we're not going to your courts to ask you or to settle this dispute, because we've learned in the past that they settled the dispute in their favor.
Mm-hmm.
They've always made decisions based on their judgment and outlook on us. But now the international community and the acknowledgement of indigenous people and their rights, by right, we have the same leverage as any other nation, any other state to bring a case against them, and they know that. Mm-hmm. So trying their best not to acknowledge it, but there's no way around it. Nature is saying this is a must.
Most definitely. Most definitely. And one of the things that I want to highlight so that our listening audience knows, I mean, I've said it already in terms of that we're all linked into the same family, but not many of us can show that link through inheritance and blood link. How is the President Malachi York, how is he linked by blood, and how has he demonstrated that he's linked by blood back to these Native Americans to show that he is who he is in that sense, to be able to claim sovereignty in this way and guise that links back to the Sudans and Ghana?
Okay, well, okay, good. That's a good question. Ghana has a Jemisi tribe there. They have a Jemisi tribe. That same descendant, that same bloodline, right, stems back, and this is historical, this is just researchable, that those tribes migrated and settled into what they now call Ghana. All of these countries and all of these lands are what they're presently called. So what happens is when a person hears Ghana, they're looking at Ghana, the territory that was labeled by the European. When we say Ghana, we're talking about the Gold Coast, or Ghana came from the warrior kings. But when you're talking about Ghana and the Gold Coast, you're talking about all of West Africa. Ghana, ancient kingdom, stemmed all the way up into what was called the Sudan. Now, when you look at the Sudan, historians know that Sudan was actually all of Africa. That's a known fact. It was known as Aswad or Asudani, which is the land of the two blacks, where the word Sud come from, or Aswad, which is black. It's the same description. It's the same tribal families, and they migrated. That same Edbasa tribe that came out of Sudan, that stemmed back to the Dongolawa or the Dongala, which were the Fuzzy Wuzzies, and that tribe out of ancient Napata, Nubia, where all of his bloodline from that end stemmed from. All of them traveled and moved across down into the bottom of South Africa, over into southwest, up into the west coast, and across the top of the Sahara on down into the old kingdoms of Mali and Ghana, Liberia, all of those areas. So they were the same people. That's why his blood is so linked to West Africa, because you're not really a Liberian. Those are not Liberians there. They had tribal names. The Yamasi are not. The Yamasi are not. They're gentle people, though they do have a bloodline from Ghana, from that west coast of Africa, all the way up into the Sudan. So his bloodline is linked as indigenous through the York family from Ben York, and Ben York was a servant to what they call servant, but they were actually servants to him, to the Lewis and Clark expedition, that famous expedition of Lewis and Clark. They used Ben York as a translator. And what happened with Ben York is that he married several Native American blood females. One was Little Bird, another one was Sacagawea, who gave birth to Washaki. That's where the Shoshone tribes come from, because Ben York had several children by these different tribes. So when you hear Shoshone, you're talking about Sacagawea. When you hear Yamasi, you're talking about Little Bird. When you hear the Washita, you're talking about Anne Marie, and that's where those four, and there's another one, those three particularly, Seminole, Seminole, Washita, and Yamasee, I mean, Shoshone, Washita, and Yamasee, that bloodline was began to mix in because Ben York's seed was spread all up from the upper east coast of the United States all the way down. And Ben York traveled all the way to Louisiana. And our father bloodline stems out of that Ben York family. Now that York blood comes from Yorkshire or Yorkshire or the Yorks out of England, because the blood, the British, they get that name was adopted by several Native Americans where they replaced our native name. So that's how the name York tied into those native tribes. It's not a native name. It's just a name that was adopted by the Native Americans because the Europeans replaced our names that they couldn't pronounce. Remember, it was language barriers, and that's why Ben York was needed to translate. And he was very useful. He knew the pathways through the mountains and through the woods. He actually helped Lewis and Clark survive. So in return, they so-called gave him his freedom. But he was responsible for the translation. They couldn't speak our language, thus they couldn't say our names, and thus they introduced that name York, which came down through the bloodline into his family out in where they say he was raised in Boston, through David York, who married his family member up there in Boston, on down to who we now know as Dr. Malachi York, on his birth certificate in Boston, which was issued. Remember, back then, 1945, they just went by your tribe, went by your blood. They didn't have computers back then. So there was no record of the birth insofar as it was typed in the computer and printed out. It was all just acknowledged from the bloodline, from your family, and they wrote the last name York because York was prevalent in his family because of his siblings and because of his stepfather and his bloodline all the way back. So all of that ties in, and it's recorded. We have the documents. We have it recorded on record, and so I hope that's clear. I don't know if there's any questions from the family, but I hope that's clear. So all of those bloodline. In fact, let me give you a bit of information. If you look at Takoradi, and the bloodline coming out of Ghana ties in to Boston because they were sister cities. So what I mean by sister cities is that when they did trade and back then, several years ago, before they had planes, they used ship cargo. They had sister cities that will port with different cities across the Atlantic. And Takoradi is the sister city of Boston. You can Google it and see that was a sister city. So it was ties in. The tribes were tied in. The Caucasians, the Caucasus, his weak genes, he always used us for his advancement. He never did anything independently. So anytime they traveled, they used our navigation. They used our knowledge of the stars to navigate through the tides. They called them it's the word I'm looking for. The intercontinental, the ocean tide.
That's right.
We knew how the tide would flow. In other words, we could put a ship on course from West Africa, and the tide would flow directly to the spot that we knew, which right across the globe. And it was a consistent transatlantic flow, a current that flowed. The ships knew this current. They knew how it would travel. They knew that over a certain amount of months, that if the ship was docked or undocked from the West Coast, it would travel to a specific spot in America, and if it left America, it would travel to a specific spot in South America. They knew those tides. So the Caucasus used us in that sense. So our tribes were rich on both coasts, and that's something that we have to realize. They tried to separate us by giving us all of these different names and saying you come from this country. Remember, the word Africa means Afrikia. It means to separate and divide. So they purposely did that. Those lines that you see, those country lines, Ghana, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Togo, Benin, South Africa.
Before you go into that aspect of things, Ambassador, I want you to go into that. But before you go into that, I just want to recap, just for those tuning in, and I want to structure that portion of things you're going to go into in a more formatted question. But first and foremost, as the ambassador said, you're in tune to the Breaking the Spell show. We got Ambassador Doosua York online, explaining about sovereignty, explaining about how President Malachi York, how he ties back into being a sovereign nation and the president of a nation, and where his bloodlines lead to. He explained how he came by the name York. He explained who Ben York was in terms of the Lewis and Clark expedition, and how they tie back into the Shoshone, the Yamasee, and the Washita tribes. All these things have been explained, in detail. But in terms of looking at it from the lines on the maps in Africa as they give it to us, or even independent countries. Some people saying they're Jamaicans, Trinidadians, rather than looking at it as one tribe, one family. The question I want to ask it, and the way that I want to structure it, is how is sovereignty different from nationality?
Oh, that's a great question.
And that's the way I want you to explain it, so that people can start understanding what we're pushing and the information in terms of the levels of where we're coming from.
Okay, I understand totally. Okay, sovereignty is it's a state of existence. It's not your nationality. You can have a nationality, right? But you're not considered your own authority. Our nation is a sovereign nation because we do not fall under the rulership of any other government, any other established authority. We have one authority, and that is Chief Maku.
That's right.
Who is our chief, Black Thunderbird Eagle, Dr. Malachi York. He is the sole authority accepted and voted in by the Wapians. And that differentiates between, you have some nations right now that are subject to the rule of other countries or other nations, that they're not sovereign because they have to go, we're self-sustaining. Sovereign is that we're self-sustaining. We have the ability to sustain ourselves. We have the ability, we have our own economy, meaning we have our own products and things that we can, our own sustenance, and we can do for ourselves. We don't need any outside influence or any outside help or foreign aid. So by right, we are sovereign because of that that independence, that self-governing, and that lack of dependency on other nations or states. And a nation, state and international law has 4 qualifications. Right? And those qualifications, you have to have a permanent population. You have to have the ability to enter into relations with governments. You have to have of course, a land. And the other qualification is your declaration or your government. When I say government, your permanent population and ability to go into relations with other governments. That's the definition of a state. And a state is, you can be independent as a state. You can declare your independence and sovereignty as a state, and other nations do not have to recognize you. That doesn't mean you're not who you are. It doesn't validate who you are. A nation, on the other, in another sense, you do not have to necessarily have a government to be a nation. You can be a permanent population on a specific land and have a common nationality, but it doesn't make you sovereign. So it's two different terms. Technically, it's real technical in it, but it has to do with your location. It has to do with your historical, your history as far as your establishment and how you came about. So there's other factors involved as well, because if you're looking at the last 20 or so years, you had 20 new nations come into existence. Look it up. There's actually 20 new nations that came into existence in the world today, recognized by the international community. In fact, one of them is Russia. Russia, Kosovo is one, and there are disputes amongst the international community, which we're amongst that category. One is between South Korea and North Korea. North Korea does not recognize South Korea. South Korea does not recognize North Korea. They both had takes the position. They take the position that each one of South Korea claims North Korea, North Korea claims South Korea. China claims Taiwan. Palestine claims Israel. Israel claims Palestine. These are disputes that has been going on for years. And the same thing is taking place with us. We're claiming our indigenous sovereign status to the world, and the U.S., they possibly can object to it, but historically they know they can't because of the grounds, atrocities, and the Holocaust that's been committed against Native American peoples and indigenous peoples. The U.S. does not have the grounds to argue in international court. They do not have enough facts to dispute our claims because it's already documented that what they did to us. This is not something that's something new. They know this. It's something that they've been keeping from the world. They play themselves. They put themselves in the image around the world as, you know, a superior superpower, and that they all for human rights, and they don't accept torture, and they're meddling in everyone else's business. But in their own backyard, they have a deep rooted history of atrocities against indigenous people, and in fact it's known as the Native American Holocaust, and it's something that they don't want the world to know. But of course the Yamasee have always been the ones to come forth and step up and say, no, you're not going to do this to us. We never allowed ourselves to be eliminated, and that's what made us so strong.
That's right. You know, I mean, I'm glad you touched on that. But do people lose anything when they claim nationality instead of sovereignty? Do you lose anything? I mean, if you're saying that, oh, I'm Jamaican, I'm not this, I'm Nigerian, I'm not that, I'm Ghanaian, I'm not that. Do you lose anything by claiming a nationality as opposed to saying you tie back to a sovereign state and you're sovereign to to your bloodline and tribe, for lack of a better word?
Absolutely not. In fact, that's one of your that's an inalienable right. A lot of people don't know you have a right to a nationality. You can claim any nationality you want. It's your right because you are sovereign insofar as you are your own authority, and have been your own authority, you can make whatever claim you want. The governments of any nation is voted in by the people. The people make the government. It's not the government that makes the people. The government is comprised of people. And so the people make the laws, and you are the people. You make the law, and you have accepted this particular person as your ruler, and you have the right to say, no, I don't accept you as who you are. I accept this as what and who I am, and this is my nationality. This is my nation. These are my family, and this is my bloodline. So no, you don't lose anything. In fact, you gain liberation because you've broken the spell, which this is the radio station and breaking the spell. When you do that, you break the spell of a label or title that was given to you. Because if you remember, if you look at most Nuwapians around the world, we take on titles that we were given from someone else. All of these labels and titles were here when we were born. When you say Jamaican, you say Trinidad. The word Trinidad comes from three mountains. It was something that when they saw three mountains, when they came to that island, and they said, "Oh, this is three mountains, tribe, Trinity, Trinidad." It's the same term. They saw three mountains, so you can't possibly be a Trinidadian. You can't possibly be a Puerto Rican because Puerto Rico, the rich port, you can't be a rich port as a nationality. That's not who and what you are. That's where you are. So a nationality is not where you are. It's not where you've been. It's what you are. And that's the nationality. And your nationality is a Nuwapian. The tribe that we came out of, we all are gentle people until you rub us the wrong way. So we're all by right Yamasee. So that's not a necessary location insofar as you can be a Yamasee and be in Trinidad and not know you're a gentle person. You just acknowledge that you're Trinidadian or Puerto Rican or from Barbados. It doesn't establish you as who you are. It's just established where you are. So no, we are Nuwapians by nationality. That's who we are. And we are from the indigenous lands, and we do claim that sovereignty. So you don't lose anything. In fact, you gain everything.
Right, because a lot of people they fail to look at things from that perspective. You know, they still cling on to these past colonial titles that have been given, and you know, this is one of the reasons why I wanted you to highlight that. But a lot of people will say, well, that's in the U.S. You know, in terms of if sovereignty is being claimed and it's in the U.S., how does that benefit me here in the U.K., or how does that benefit me being in Trinidad or Jamaica or in Africa, wherever they're listening to this broadcast at the moment? They will say, how does that benefit me to say that I'm this when the head of state is going to be based in the Americas? Can you explain how that it transcends borders and barriers?
Simple. I'm going to give you a prime example. You have Jews, the so-called Jebusite, so-called Jews who claim that their state or nation is where? Where do they claim they're from?
Israel, yeah.
Exactly. But where do you find these people?
Everywhere. Yeah, that's right.
But they say, well, no, I'm a Jew. I'm a Jebusite. I'm a cursed seed. But you best believe if it's time for us to go back to where we're from, they have a state to claim. They have a nation to claim. So as Nuwapians, though we have been dispersed, we all over the world, Canada, everywhere, because our state, our nation that we claimed, and the land that we claimed was where?
Tamari of the West.
And we would come and be together when it was time, when we decided whatever times out of the year we decided to come, because not only did we come on our President's Day, June 26th, we also came throughout the year to just powwow and talk and touch bases with our spiritual roots and our culture. So it doesn't matter. We're free, independent people, free will. So yeah, you Nuwapians, y'all are all over. Yeah, you may be in London for now, but once we get our land back and you stand up for your land and stand up for your nation and say, no, that's our nation. This is our land. When you acknowledge that and stand up for it, you have a right to travel and come back and forth and go as you please. But right now, don't get assimilated. We want to make sure the Nuwapian family do not allow the Caucasus to assimilate you back into their system. That's the point. They want Africans to assimilate into their system so they can take their soul. They want Nuwapians to assimilate into their system so they can benefit off of your spiritual powers. Don't allow that. State your nationality. Stand up for who you are. Just because you're living there, it doesn't mean that you are. What would a person from the UK consider themselves?
I hear a lot of black people, for lack of a better word, calling themselves British, which is surprising.
Where does the word British come from?
Wow. Well, the British people, the birth covenant.
The word itself.
Well, birth from the birth covenant, I think, goes back to the 10th century, 999 AD. You know, that contract between the Moors, the Scottish Moors, and
Right, he would know the contracts from 1666 on the Muli Ismail and Sidi Muhammad, and those contracts have actually been ratified here. So they stand as mentioned by the master teacher, Isaac York, on many occasions. So yes, as you say, birth from the Hebrew word, birth meaning covenant, and ish was of that male. So when people claim to be British, it doesn't actually stem back to anything or any landmass in particular.
That's right.
So you see, do you see the direction now? So if you ask a person, what does it mean? How does that relate to you, and how does that give you a nationality? It doesn't say, because if it goes back to covenant, right? So if that is the term, then how does that explain who you are? It doesn't.
Most definitely not.
If you look at the terms, that we pick up, it doesn't tell us who we are. Nowhere on the planet does it say who exactly we are. Africa doesn't tell you who we are. It's a description of separated people, but it doesn't say who we are. Who are we? We are Nuwapians. By spiritual science, the spiritual practice, and what's in your genetics, that's who you are. As a Nuwapu, as a person that lives, that was born, you were born a Nuwapian. You were born using reasoning. That's inherited. Right. That's a right. So by right, you are Nuwapian wherever you are. It's just a trick of the devil. It's a trick to make you assimilate, to fall under the spell and make us think that, okay, with this, with that, because we have lost our identity because of his superiority imagery that he places, his trickery inside of the media, inside of movies, inside of advertisements, inside of radio, magazines, books, everywhere you find his image.
That's right.
Is what has to be broken. And the moment we do that, we reject everything about you and what you say, then the cloak of that sixth ether ghost force, that ghost and phase and of fog and haze will be removed from our eyes, and we'll see that, wow, we are Nuwapian. We do have a nation. We do have a land. We do have a mascot. You know, our national mascot is the Bennu bird. And that Bennu bird it means to build, from the word ben, to build. Banan, which is a thunderbird. That's our bird. Our sacred word is huhi, meaning free will. We have national colors. In fact, we have a pledge of allegiance. We have a national anthem, in which all Nuwapians will be getting soon. There's a declaration that our president has put together that everyone will get with our sacred seal. We have a tribal seal, and we have a crest. We have a tribal flag, and we have a nation's flag.
That's right.
Language. We have a land. All of that is established. This is not something new. So as long as we online, every Nuwapian worldwide, as long as we stay in tune with that, as long as we just do our research and stay logged in to the family and logged into our president, stay online with him, we'll be okay.
That's right. I want to highlight to our listeners, this is a Breaking the Spell show, and you're listening to Ambassador Doosua York breaking down the principles behind sovereignty and nationality. You know, at the moment there's a massive push on behalf of the United Nuwapian Nation, you know, in terms of getting our president from behind prison's door, Dr. Malachi York. Also, you know, we're going to open up the phone lines and the text lines so that people can text in and call in and ask their question, you know, because we normally, for the first part of any interview, allow the interviewee to get his point across, his or her point across, so that there's an understanding, and then from the understanding we can generate questions and take questions. The landline number is 0208-904-5692. I'll give that again, 0208-904-5692. Text line is 07950-787-581. 07950-787-581. I'm going to summarize on behalf of the ambassador. You know, we touched on several different areas. We touched on sovereignty and the kidnapping. In terms of sovereignty, you know, a supreme independent authority, that's what it means, you know what I'm saying, and ties back to being indigenous as a people, you know, people of a specific land, meaning that you're indigenous. And in our sovereignty, you know, most people that are sovereign, they have a chief or a miku. You know, you have, you know, when you call yourself sovereign, you can't lose your sovereignty. Someone can't take it away from you. You have to give it up. You know, so we're a sovereign people, and this is something that's been hidden from us since so-called colonialization and so-called slavery.
So, as a sovereign nation, are we not due some reparations then? We're going to ask that question, you know, and you know, in terms of tying back to the different bloodlines in the Americas, under the different tribes, the Yamasee, the Washita, the Seminole, the Creek Confederacy, the Mound Builders, you know, whatever names, those tribes that were described as dark-skinned and woolly-haired, meaning that they, for lack of a better word, had African features,
right? Those same tribes, those same people that were brought to the islands, talking about your Jamaica, your Trinidad, your Barbados, all the islands, the Caribbean, right? As well as those same family that had migrated from the Caribbean here via the airplane or via the banana boat, to get to the UK, it's still the same family. If you take it back into Africa, you're talking about the Sudans, those that migrated back into southwest and into the west of Africa, the Akan, the Ashanti, is still one family, one bloodline. So we're saying, leave out the names they've given us through colonization and so-called slavery. Leave out the Jamaican, leave out the Trinidadian, leave out the Nigerian. Start referring to yourself according to those tribal titles, or go by the nationality under one umbrella, which is being authorized now, which is what the ambassador is dealing with the United Nations and those bodies. Nuapians, under one president or one chief, one Miku. Right? So that's what we're dealing with, and that's what he's explaining. And he's explained the bloodline of Dr. Malachi York in detail, in how he ties back into those bloodlines all the way around. And that's what the interview's been about. We're going to jump to the text line. The first text is from 491 that says, is there somewhere on International Court website where we can research and see reference to Nuapian documents submitted to International Court?
Okay. At this moment, what's happening with the court is that because this is, let me explain to you how powerful what we're doing is. Because this is the first time, and they don't have a case in their history since 1927. The International Court actually goes back before then to the Permanent Court of Justice. They don't have a case that they can compare this to. Because this is the first time, again, an indigenous group of people that was thought to be annihilated. You have to remember that the U.S. never anticipated Native American tribes forming as a nation as they were prior to their colonialism. They never saw it. They never anticipated. They in their mind, they eliminated the Yamasee, they eliminated the Choctaw, they eliminated the Shoshone, the Seminole. They eliminated all of them and got the land and moved on and created this nation that they made appear as if they built from the ground up, and that's not true. So they never thought that the Yamasee tribe of Shoshone Wichita Creek Nation would come out, develop, rise out of the ashes, and say, this is who we are, and build their nation, their government, their state the way that they did. So it's unprecedented because indigenous peoples around the world have never been recognized because the superpowers that suppressed them were responsible for creating the United Nations. So remember, when the United Nations Charter was signed in 1945, it was only the most powerful governments, China, China, the USSR, the United States, of course, Italy, Poland, you had Portugal, Spain, and the seven heads and 10 horns, the seven heads that controlled the smaller nations, they were responsible for creating the United Nations. So with that establishment, the thought of indigenous peoples around the world had been eliminated, so the thought of them didn't exist in their creation. So the cases that were brought to the International Court were only based on the nations that signed the charter. This is the first time indigenous people, a nation, a sovereign nation, retained sovereignty, come forth and say, no, we are part of the United Nations as well. We are part of the world stage as well. We're part of the international community as well. So they're like, where did these people come from? Especially dark-skinned Yamasee coming out of the U.S., never been. In fact, in Switzerland, when they saw the Yamasee there, we were the only dark-skinned people there. Everyone else, indigenous person, were from Caucasus to mixed breed. That's what they saw. We were the darkest up there. So so you have to remember that this is still a fight in the International Court. We're fighting to have the case heard by a particular judge. We're going to have the case heard by a particular judge, and we have to, which is being done now. There's still a lot of work being done. And that's why you may now have heard any updates since 2 weeks ago, because paperwork has to be drawn up to establish why the International Court has jurisdiction. They want us to show them, and it's never been done before, how they have jurisdiction, because there's nothing they can go by. There's no court. In other words, in any other court hearings, judges typically go by a case law that they can refer to that says, oh, yes, well, we had this situation before in 1988. This is the proceeding. This is how it went. Let's refer to this. Okay, let's move forward. But in this stage, at this point, an indigenous nation coming forth and bringing a case against the United States or another United Nations member, right? They're like, where do we find this case law to determine how to proceed? They can't find it because it hasn't been done. So we have to show them how they have jurisdiction, because according to them, we are not a state.
Just for 941 that text that message in. When was it that you guys were over in Switzerland? Was it at the courts?
Well, the courts were not in Switzerland.
The international.
May it was in June, actually.
It was in June. It was The Hague that you were at. Sorry.
Yeah, there for a few weeks where we instituted the proceedings, and we've been in contact with the courts and since then.
Okay, just so that they understand, because they're asking about that information in some sense, so they got that in great detail. Text message from 319. I think this is a bit off topic, but you know, the whole of Africa was Ethiopia, not Sudan. Would you like to elaborate? And we apologize about the type of text is, but you know, because we don't want people to feel we're shying away from questions, irrespective of how they sound. You know, can you elaborate on that for the person that texted in, please?
What was the question again?
The whole of Africa was not Ethiopia. The whole of Africa was Ethiopia, not Sudan.
Well, that's an opinion. That's not actual facts.
Okay.
It's not actual facts. Because Ethiopia is you can't have all of you can't have all of Africa called Ethiopia when Ethiopia is Amharic. It's a specific region. You can't. It was never named. It was never named for the entire continent, because the entire continent had different tribes that spoke different languages. So it's impossible for it to be called Ethiopia when the ancient Egyptians, the Tamarans, didn't speak Amharic. So they couldn't use the term Ethiopia. Neither could, if you look at certain, if you go to, say, the area of the west coast of Africa, you can't, it was not considered, Ethiopia. So no, it's a site of one of the oldest existences, but it was not called. Actually, Ethiopia is from Gizik. Let me correct it. Not Amharic, but they're similar. It's not. It was never called. It may have been called Ethiopia by the people of Ethiopia, of this particular area, but not by the majority of the world. We all had our specific tribes, and we respected those tribes, and all those tribes had different dialects of various languages, and based on the language of the tribe that was spoken, the language of the tribe that was speaking it, and they determined what their area was called, not the entire continent. That's a bit general, though I do understand the question. It's not accurate.
Okay. I hope that answers the question. 319. Text message from 018. It's quite a forward question, you know, to the point. So are you saying we Africans are Nawapians?
I'm saying that, yes. I'm saying yes by definition, not me. I don't want people to say, like, okay, it's coming from me. You dealing with the word.
Break it down.
It's key, which we've always been taught to pay attention to the word. Yes, all of Africans are Nuwapians. You're not separated people, though you were made to separate. That's not your the core of who you are. We've always been tribal, unified community people, and Nuwapians, in your blood, you were born outside of religious titles and labels. You were born with an inherited reasoning faculty, mental faculty that you have. The reasoning, the reason how you know you're Nuwapian is because you're here. It took reasoning touch that egg. In other words, that sperm that found its way to the egg, it took a certain amount of reasoning and thinking that got you here, because you knew in the womb that you had to get there before 777 million other sperm that was traveling in the same direction. And it was you, your will, your thinking, your right reasoning, your right wisdom, and your overstanding at that point that you had to get there. And if you didn't get there, you were not going to survive. It's the same thing that's happening now. You have to get back to that source. And that is what Nuwapu is. Nuwapu is reasoning.
Most definitely.
Ability, spiritual science that we have inside of us that was given to us from our ancestors, passed down from the stars. So yes, you are. Africans are Nuwapians. If you consider yourself African, you are Nuwapian. We use those terms because, in order to teach, but to break the spell, you're not African. Nobody is really African.
Most definitely. Remember, it's the Breaking the Spell show, and it's all about getting your questions in. That's how we function. We don't shy away from the questions. Text your question in, call in with your questions. The landline number, 0208-904-5692. I'll give it again, 0208-904-5692. Don't wait until the ambassador is not online for you to bombard us with questions that the ambassador should have answered. So get your questions in, 0208-904-5692. Text line 07950 787 581. 07950 787 581. We got a text message here from 941. He said, it's a good question. Do you lose nationality, i.e. British, American, etc., when claiming sovereignty? What about passports? Some Jews still claim to be Americans and travel as Americans but are still considered Jews. That is in part the question.
Okay, can you repeat it again, please? I'm sorry.
So do you lose nationality, i.e. British, American, etc., when claiming sovereignty? What about passports? Some Jews still claim to be Americans and travel as Americans but are still considered Jews.
Well, what happens with that is that they're taking advantage of their sovereignty. Being able, when you are a nation in a sovereign state, you have the ability to go into relations with other nations. Then by right you can engage in that type of institution. You can issue, which we did.
Okay. Yeah.
You can issue currency, which we did.
Yeah, we are here then.
It's up to the people to accept the currency. It's up to the people to accept the passport. It's something that our government.
Read off the question, yeah?
I'm sorry, Ambassador. I want you to. I really want the answer to go across, but you were cutting in and out. If you could just recap on that answer that you were given, because you broke up on a couple of occasions, and I just want to make sure that the listener is getting the answer.
Okay. What I was saying was that they're really taking advantage of their statehood. I mean, when you are a national of a particular nation or state, and and your government has the ability to go into other relations with other governments, and that's a decision that's accepted as far as passport, and those nation dealings, then you by right you can engage in that. We were moving towards that. If I'm understanding your question correctly, as far as passport issuing and national ID issuing, we were moving towards that. I don't know if people remember, in the Constitution of the United Nuwapian Nation, we had declarations and articles in there that explained about passport, explained about national ID, it explained about the laws of our tribe, of our nation. All of that it's in the Constitution, and it was a binding document.
I still have my passport, so yes.
Quick question for you, bro.
Someone just phoned in. He wanted to know if the name of ancient Ethiopia was Abyssinia. That's the first one. And he wanted to know if Ethiopia wasn't the mother of Egypt as well. That's the second question that he was asking. I don't know, relevant.
But these are names that was given, right? It was given to these particular areas. Remember, Italy actually invaded. It was Ethiopia at one time, as well as Eritrea, and the British. But the British couldn't conquer. All of that area was one area. It wasn't. It was one land. It wasn't separated like it is now. And that's a part of the trick, where they separated the lands and made it appear as though these people were separated people. These different tribes were separated tribes, and that really wasn't the case. So it's kind of difficult to express the importance. I don't know if people are getting that. These are names that, of course, they were. Some of the names were indigenous, like Ethiopia, which is actually Gizik. It borders Eritrea, and Eritreans and Ethiopians, though they attempt to appear to people as if they're not the same, a line cannot distinguish you. An imaginary line cannot distinguish people. It's about 84, close to 84, about 84 million, if I'm not mistaken, million of people. It was not the name of the entire continent, and it definitely was not the name of a particular area. It was drawn that way in order for them to be a part of the League of Nations.
So what you're saying then, in principle, so for the person that called in with that question, you're saying that basically the names are what people are overly focusing on. Yes, the landmass was there, the people were there, etc. But they shouldn't overly focus on the names because of the invaded principles on the names that were used at a certain point.
Exactly. And these names carry on today. So in the minds, it's birthed in the minds of the people when it's introduced as Ethiopia, but it wasn't the way it's introduced as Ethiopia to people not modern day, but at one time it was known as Cush.
Right.
If you use the biblical aspect of it, it was known as Cush, and that was known as the land of the blacks.
Right.
It wasn't a specific area. It all stems back to Cush. Egypt stems back to burnt faces. Egyptos, actually, which means center, not burnt faces. They became burnt faces, or Aegyptos, the three European countries that invaded Sparta, Rome, and another country, Rome, Sparta, and I'm not sure the other land that invaded Egypt. So those names are just terms that they over the time, different instances that picked up. Then those titles, adjectives of those places, but it wasn't the name, the original name of the place.
Can you tell me to turn his radio on? I'm sorry, Ambassador. We've got a live caller that we're going to take. We're going to take a live call. Caller, you live?
Yeah. So what's the direct name of the ancient Africa then? What was the original name?
Can you hear me, Ambassador?
Yes, I heard him. He said what's the original name?
Right.
By who? It depends on who from what perspective are you talking
point
from?
of view.
As the ambassador is explaining, caller, what he's explaining that it's a tribe, and at certain times.
So there's no real original name for the continent.
Hold on, I'm going to let him answer. I'm just explaining. When you say from the African point of view, you're talking about different tribes. So different tribes may have had different names at different times.
The head of the tribe then, yeah? Life began at the river Nile, so that means the whole Ethiopia-Kushite Empire was the beginning then.
No, not necessarily.
But
I'll let the
according to
ambassador
the Bible,
answer.
yeah? According to the Bible, it talks about Ethiopia from Genesis, yeah, to Revelation. So that means if you're going to say our words is from different people, from Greeks and this and that and whatnot, yeah, that means there is no real truth then. There ain't no reality. How that means the truth
No,
is
caller.
So I can tell him, I hear his question. I understand what he's saying. He sounds like maybe involved with Rastafari, and I'm not sure. I'm not judging him, but that's a lot of that. When you're dealing with Ethiopia and being the original land, what they're doing is they're isolating. That's the word I'm looking for. They're isolating our people to a specific area. And then they say, well, from this point of view, this specific area, all of Africa was called Ethiopia. That's not the case. Because if you go let's go back to...
So what is the name then? That's all?
Let him answer, caller. I will have to really kill the call. Please let him answer.
All right.
Okay, go ahead, Ambassador.
Well, okay. From whatever perspective, let me go back further than that. When they came, invaders came to the dark continent. Let's use that because we're speaking English right now. When they came to this dark continent and they saw these various cultures and people, right? Depending on the language that the person...
So you say we never had no culture before the white people come? Is that what you're trying?
Go ahead, Ambassador, finish.
What I'm saying is that the names that we pick up, the names that we have picked up in our lives, being whatever age, from 2 to 70, these are names that was given to the people there. The original seed did not use terms that foreigners gave us. We didn't use those. If you spoke Arabic, right? And there are languages that came before Arabic. If you spoke Arabic and you saw that there was a land of black people, wherever you found them, they would be the land of the blacks. You would use the word Sudan. So at one time, all of Africa was called Sudan. At one time, it would have been known as Kush or Ethiopia to those that were there and to those that came upon that land. But if you were a Kushite, if you were a Sudanese, if you were a Ghanaian or from the land of the gold, then those terms were not indigenous terms. That's what I'm saying. They were not indigenous to who and what we spoke and who and what we are. We didn't call, in other words, if you lived in Africa, you wouldn't say we're going to the land of Sudan because you were there. So we don't need to say I'm going to the land of Sudan if you were already on it. So these are terms that's given from someone from the outside looking in, not from the inside looking out.
Right. So I hope the caller understood that that the names that he's using are names that are of people looking in rather than names of people looking out. I think the caller is gone. Okay. We'll move on to the next text message. But that was well explained. I don't think I have nothing to add to that. Text message from 446. What is the origin of the word Nuwapian? Which I think is a good question, judging that we're saying to people they are Nuwapians. So it's a fair question when someone says, well, what's the origin of the word Nuwapian? I know you explained it, but I know it would have gone amiss for when people didn't get exactly what you were saying at the point when you explained it. Can you please explain again for me, Ambassador?
Just a minute, Ambassador. There was a next question.
But one at a time.
Pertaining to that, like someone wanted a primary source for that word Nuwapo and where they could go and find it, because they say that we claim that we are Nuwapians, but there is no evidence or any source to prove it to us. Did you hear?
Of the origin of the word?
Yeah, what was the origin and where they could find a source to prove that, to say that they say that we claim that we're Nuwapians, so we want to find some sort of source or something where we could go out there and find it, because someone was talking to me even today, and they was talking about the group Nuwapi. Was it Nuwapia? They was talking about the group and said that was coming out in the 70s, and that was one of the first time that word was being used. I don't know. Just want to ask a question for them.
Again, it depends on the source. It depends on the authority that the person chooses to accept as a source. Now, you remember, everyone has their own authority on who they consider the source of all knowledge. Some people just use Webster. If they decide to go to Webster, and Webster came after Nuwapians, then they're not going to get a definition there. And the reason why our master has kept that the word Nuwapu, the definition of the word, the true meaning of the word, not the surface meaning, the true meaning of the word. The reason why he kept it sacred and secret is because whenever a person hears it, they would have to come to the source. And the source is Dr. Malachi Z. Nuwap is a science, which we are Nuwapu. It's a science, our spiritual science. It has no origin insofar as source that you can refer to in Caucasian information. You won't find it in any of their books because their time frame only goes back 6,000 years. So you won't find it referenced in their documents. You can't find it referenced in our documents, in our recordings, in our papyrus, in our inscribings, because it was the way that we lived. We lived by knowing. We lived by facts. We lived with other sciences as well, Asanubu, Napanubu, and those sciences there. We had them, but when you deal with Nuwapu and the science of sound right reasoning, it's something that's in you. It's not something that's defined in a book that you can go read from a Caucasian who came after you and named you everything except what you were. The source of the information is our president, Pa Mumka. He's the one that introduced the word. Thus, he's the one that you will have to find where you will have to go to get it defined the way it should be and not what other people is interpreting it as. But the science of who we are, the right reasoning, the right knowledge, the right understanding, the factual, the test that knowledge has to pass, evidence, the reasoning, and the proof there, that has to be established in the hearts and minds of yourself. You as a person, when you stand and you say, that's a fact to me, you accept it as a fact, and it has been proven as a fact. That was the way ancient Tamarans, Africans, for lack of a better word, lived before the invasion of those religious doctrines.
So by what you're saying, then, Ambassador, is in principle, if someone wants the root of it, they'd have to ask the president directly. But in principle, those who are living a lifestyle of facts, going by what's been proven factually and through research and higher level reasoning, that in definition is someone who would tie under the principle of Nuwapu, because that's how our ancestors lived, and that's how we should be living.
Absolutely, it's in you. It's not something that could ever be defined, because it's more spiritual. The spiritual powers that you have was never defined because they were infinite. And that spiritual power was inherited through your DNA, through the practices, your environment that you were in, where you were, what you accepted, who you were around, the food and the food that you ate, the liquids that you drank. All was a part of releasing that encoded DNA that allowed you the certain mental capacity and the conscious level to think on a higher level, to where you could accept the beings who introduced Nuwapu to you on this planet. Nuwapu goes back to millions and actually trillions of stars, to our ancestors way from back then, when they descended down here and gave us our way of life, introduced that way of life to us, and planted it in our genes, planted it in our seed. Which goes back to the example that the master teacher explained, that you were Nuwapian before you were anything else in the womb. So you dealt with, matter of fact, you dealt with supreme reasoning, not even right reasoning. It was supreme reasoning.
So how would I collaborate Nuwapu to someone apart from what you have just explained, said goes back all the way through the DNA? Or would I give somebody else something to collaborate what I've just said to them, to say that you're a Nuwapian apart from that? You know, most people always look for a primary source. When you get some sort of information, you could back it up somewhere or collaborate it somewhere. How would I do that?
Well, you have to refer to our civilization that we built. You have to refer to the pyramids, the sciences of the pyramids, the fact that it's obvious we had or knew something more than anyone else on the planet. We obviously knew how the stars were aligned with the planet, the 24,000 year cycles. We obviously knew how Orion's belt lined up with the Giza Plateau and how to build those 3 pyramids there, and all up and down in the Sudan and Nubia and Napata. We obviously had a higher level of information because we were cloning. We obviously had a higher level of information if we used lasers and could cut those 2.5-ton bricks that nobody could cut. And to this day, they can't duplicate how we did it, but we know exactly how they did everything and built all of their edifices and all of their buildings. We know that, but they can't explain to us how we did it. So the proof is in our existence and that we left behind, and the information that we left behind, the knowledge that we left behind, and the protection of our ancestors that's still amongst us. We obviously have a divine connection that no one else on the planet Earth can explain. So when you present those certain facts, amongst other things, in our scrolls, in our Right Knowledge books, and our various series, when you present that, right, and present that evidence to them, the evidence is there because we left it there. We left our faces on the walls to show the people this is who we are, and these are the individuals that built it. This is the society, the ancient builders, the ancient Egyptian builders, the original Masonic order. All of that ties back into us who were the first inhabitants on the planet. So when you present this type of evidence, overwhelmingly they have to bow down to the fact that you have something that no one else has. And that something is a science of spiritual power inside of you that is developed once you accept who you are as a Nuwapian, and you allow it to come forth. Other than that, with those titles and labels that we claim, we're cutting off that source, that connection to our ancestors who do exist on the other side and would like to contact their children the moment we make that link. And you make that link through Nuwapu. Nuwapu is the acknowledgement, which again stems back to reasoning. It's the acknowledgement of your ancestors because you exist. And the fact that you stand there and listen, the fact that we are on this radio station, the fact that we are communicating, and that we are aware of each other, it shows that we exist. Now, in that existence, we came from 2 parents, which is a fact. And if that's the case, then they came from parents. And if that's the case, or that's the facts, then it reasons out that our root seed stems back further than any other race, further than any other people on the planet. And so it all ties into reasoning. Everything that exists now ties into reasoning. Nothing that really exists you can't separate from reasoning. Right? Reasoning is the mental faculty, is this conscious, the mind that we have to bring things into existence.
That's right.
And that was introduced to us by Pa Munzal. So the definition of the word, the true meaning of the word, he really, what he's saying, he's never really given it. He's never really given anyone the definition of it, though he's given explanations. He's given just examples of it and what we can do, because we built Tamaray, we built our land there, Egypt of the West. That was a small fraction of our mental powers. He hasn't really exposed us to the real sciences of Wu Nuwap. And it's constantly changing, because of course there's different levels of the spell. Like if you still have a person saying what source, and this is not an attack on the questioner. If you have a person that says what source would I go to, then in their mind there's another authority to judge our doctrine by.
Hello, can you hear me, Ambassador?
Yes.
Sorry about that. We lost you for a second there. Caller, if you could call back. I don't know what happened. You got disconnected somewhere along the line in trying to transfer you over to ask your questions. We got quite a few questions, and I wanted you to touch on, before I go to the questions, I wanted you to touch on for me what this has triggered in the U.S. I mean, I was listening to your broadcast the other night, the one that went on for around 3 hours, and I felt you didn't even scratch the surface of the information you had to give about the amount of so-called Africans or fellow Nuapians that are incarcerated in the U.S. Illegally, not just our president, but you mentioned several names, and you gave several different nationalities in terms of from different the African diaspora. There was quite a few people there. I just want you to touch on in terms of what this has triggered and what you're now realizing the breadth and the detail behind this work and how important it is for every single person from African descent listening.
Well, what I realized is that we have a monumental task, because you're looking at a system that for years has suppressed millions of people. Indigenous people have been killed. Even Africans even in modern day times, Africans, for lack of a better word, from various countries have come here in pursuit of the so-called American dream. And they come in pursuit of the so-called American dream. They caught in a legal system because of the ignorance towards the laws of this country. They caught in a legal system that they have no that is out to suppress all Africans, or was built on the suppression of Africans. So they end up in a quite peculiar situation. And reaching out to them, finding out about the injustices, is beyond anything that I could have imagined was taking place. And the fact that one person, we have almost 75 to 100 petitions from different African nationals who are asking us to assist them in bringing a case against the U.S. or contacting their country to assist them because of their rights of foreign national rights being violated, and them to involve themselves in a treaty transfer. And it's just ironic that none of these things has been done with African nations, especially with the treaty transfers. Now, a treaty transfer is simple. It's saying that African national incarcerated in the U.S. would like to go back to their nation to serve out the rest of their time, to be close to their family. Do you know there's no transfer treaty with any African nation with the U.S.? There's none. So with that taking place, we have a lot of injustices that we have to bring to the forefront and help our people, because we are the ones that have to fight for the freedom. We have to do it. No one else is going to do it. If not now, it's going to be never. We're at the end of time where things has to change. Things will change in our favor. And if we don't step up to the plate to be responsible enough to take responsibility for our other indigenous families, African Nuapians on this planet, then we're doomed. If we don't take that responsibility. So we have to free ourselves. We have to free those fellow indigenous people, Africans as well as Native Americans, out of their judicial system, those that have been hurt, have been lied on, have been discriminated against, have been abused, their rights have been violated, as well as prioritize our fight for our president to free us even off of this planet. So it's big. When I sit back and think about it, sometimes I get overwhelmed. I really get overwhelmed because of the distance of our family and the dissension that's amongst our family. I fight hard through it because I know it's for a greater cause, but at times it does get not discouraging. I don't get discouraged. I do get disappointed more so because of the lack of unity when you hear certain things, as far as particular people speaking against the master teacher, even coming out against me to try to discredit what the master teacher is asking of us, not discredit me because I'm nobody. I'm a fellow brother. I'm a family member. I'm one of the fellow brothers in the fight. I just have a particular job, but they try to discredit the messenger so they can discredit the message from the source. So that becomes a problem. It's not something that we dwell on, but it's definitely something that is a fight as well. So when you have all of those elements involved, it takes strong people, strong Nuwapians to rise up out of it and come forth and say, all of that doesn't matter, because ultimately at the end, we all in this together. Decides to come out against the world, and he released his wrath against the people that worked with him, when he turns on them, then everyone will be coming to Nuwapians for help. And we have to remain strong and stand strong as a nation, as a sovereign people, free will and determined, and continue this fight.
Definitely, Ambassador. I do agree with you 100%. I want to run through some. We have only 5 to 10 minutes left on the show, unfortunately. I wanted to run through a few quick pointers and text messages because people took the time. So if you could just summarize each thing quite quickly before you take some time to summarize with each question. Question from Aisha. Or should I say, Aisha. I wanted to thank Ambassador Doosua for the hard work on behalf of the family. I know there are very many ways to support, but I wanted to know how you guys are managing with finances. Where can the family send money to with certainty that the money will go to the works you guys are doing?
Well, now that's, to me, and I appreciate the support. I appreciate even the offer. And it's not something that I'm saying that we don't, that our family, the tribe, the nation doesn't need. But what happened, and what we've been taught, what I've been taught by our father, me specifically, I have always been taught to do for self.
That's right.
Create businesses for our nation, things that we can all involve ourselves in. Support our own. We buy from each other, sell to everyone else. So my attempts to eliminate the strain on financial donators, they're people who donate heavily to the nation. And I didn't want personally to ask any particular person or any family or community or group of our fellow Nuwapian Nation members worldwide specifically. So the radio station was created with a subscription for $10 a month, where you did have access to the archives of all of the classes that our master teacher has put out. And right now, the radio station is still up. It was sabotaged. Really, it was attempted to be sabotaged. So I backed off of it because I saw the positive effect of where we was going with it, that it was going, and the amount of resistance that came back. So I backed off of it. I realized it was really powerful outlet. It was something that was needed. It actually launched last year, June 26th. It was just a beautiful thing. Everyone was involved. We had the He's Innocent show. We had the children's story time, etc., and questions and answer class. The radio station has never ceased to exist. But what's on the radio station, if people would like to purchase classes, again, it's in the download section, and we'll be putting up a lot of classes there from which will help us understand where the master teacher, what he was saying in the 90s, in reference to our indigenous status. Those classes are there. Factology versus theology, you can download those classes, and that financial purchase will help assist in the fight. And there, it will eliminate us asking, or eliminate the anyone asking for money or funds, because oftentimes when that comes up, people often say, well, it's just about money. And you hear those things, and we want to eliminate that. We want to mend those wounds that people have felt over the years because of the effects of our government being in exile and our people being spread all over the world and our president being incarcerated. So we want to try to eliminate, help heal those wounds. So that's the direction. If anyone wants to help, they can simply purchase a class. I mean, it's a bookstore here at the embassy. The radio station is here at the embassy. We fight. Your lectures are coming here to the embassy. So, I have quite a bit of responsibility for myself, but this is something that I live and I would die for. So, of course, if people want to support that more, they can go right to UNN Radio, go to the download section, and purchase classes. I mean, there's hundreds of classes that will be available. So any one of those classes will help assist because, and it will help you as well. It will help you get close to the master teacher as far as the doctrine that he's been teaching since 1967. It will help you get an understanding of the various schools that he took us through, and it'll also help at the same time help the nation assist in moving forward legally with the fight. So I think that's ideal. I think the family agrees that it's not a financial burden on everyone, because the acts. I'm not saying that we're not in for donations, but I don't typically want to solicit like that because I don't want our people to be discouraged because they think it's about money. Our people have been damaged enough, and I love my Nuwapian family. I love my nation. I love our president, and I don't want to hurt anyone. Being in the position that I'm in, I have to be very careful what I say on the air. I have to be very careful what I say on Facebook, regardless of how people come and slander at me. I have to be careful that there's children that's paying attention, there's women. So, I put myself in, I'm in a position where I have to be mindful of that. So, I mean, I will not get on the air and ask for money, but I will say if you want to support, then support the radio station. It's something that's been started up by the nation. You go on there, you can become a subscriber. I mean, and if you have 1,000 people purchasing one class, then you can see that everyone's $5 helps for the bigger picture, and it's not a financial strain, and everyone helps each other.
I want to run through quickly before we wrap up. Apart from filling and sending in the ledgers, what can we in the UK do to help the efforts? And where can the ledgers be found for those who are interested in learning more about this process?
The ledgers be found as far as, what do you mean found? I'm sorry, like...
there's a lot of listeners that are listening. This is the first time they're hearing this information. So where can they find the ledger to actually read onto what it's saying and what they would be signing up towards, and what in terms of sovereignty and so forth?
That's clear. The ledger basically is you're making a claim that you are Nuwapian and you have accepted your president, Dr. Malachi York. You've accepted him and you voted him in, and you accept him today. I mean, some people voted him in then, and some people accept him now as their president. So that's what the ledger is saying. And he's saying everyone should sign, children, women, people who are upset, because there's a lot of disgruntled Nuwapians out there. He said, be upset, sign the ledger. After you sign the ledger, you can go back to being upset. He's saying that it's important. He said that if you don't sign this ledger, he said you will be sorry in the end. He said you will be sorry because this is his nation's ledger, where he vouches for you once he's free in the world stage, and he says, who are your people? He can pull out the ledger from every individual and show them that, yes, these people supported, my people supported me at this time. So that's the importance of the ledgers. Now, the ledgers have been circulating through email. We will have them on the site within the next few days. So if you can be kind enough to let the family know, those that are listening as well, to tune in a few days, or you can tune in today to UNN Radio. On the radio station is classes and is music 24 hours, and the classes are being played, but you can also purchase the class. We will put the ledger on the site. It's not up because we had modified it, and we're still modifying it. It will be up in the next few days where you can download it and mail it right into the embassy from wherever you are. So that's a place you can find it. You can also find it on woonuwap.com.
Most definitely. There's a text message here saying we need a part 2 or a month link would be great. But like the brother said, there's the website, there's the online radio that you can get regular updates as well as classes. You can start understanding far more about how the sovereignty comes in and how it helps you with all that information that was taught during the 90s by the president of the nation, and how it ties and helps you. But on that note, Ambassador, I want you to take a minute or so to wrap up, and because we have to go to the ad break and hand over to the next coming presenters to the station. But please take the time to send your shout outs to the family and anything you'd like to highlight.
Okay, family, it's always a pleasure to be able to communicate with Nuwapians worldwide. I find the strength love and the power of our unity. The love is in our unity. The unity is in our love. All of that are really motivating factors for us to move forward and come out of this on top, to free our father, get him out of the belly of the beast, get him out of the hands of the cockasoo and the cursed seed, and free ourselves. So this radio station and any media that Nuwapians worldwide have, we should support, so we can stay connected and not show that we are unified and not dissenting amongst ourselves. So I mean, it's just an honor again to be fighting. Period. And you should be honored as well to be fighting for something that's yours, something that is it's for your future, for our future, for our children, for our families. And it's something that never will be done before. This opportunity will never happen. Our ancestors are depending on us to make this happen. There's no spookism involved. We have to do this. Our Natharu are amongst us. They're with us. They're relying on us to make sure that we free ourselves. And in that, we are freeing them from the other side. A lot of them died in slavery. A lot of them died fighting for this same fight. And we have the opportunity to do what we must in order to make sure that we usher in this new cycle on the right foot, on our accord, on the shoulders of Nuwapians, on the shoulders of Nuwapu, speaking our language, having our land, having our president, and defeating this beast and breaking the spell. So I appreciate the time, I appreciate the love, and I appreciate the support. We appreciate it. I'll send the love from the family to Pa Mumkrak, our president, His Excellency Dr. Malachi Z.K. York. I'll definitely send him the love. I'll let him know that the entire UK London family tuned in. Everyone is on the same accord. He loves to hear the unity. He loves to hear that everyone is working with each other. He doesn't want to hear anything other than that. I won't bring that to him. So I'll make sure that it's all positive, and we make sure we stay tuned in. I mean, we're going to give regular updates on our radio station continually, and just again, I appreciate it all.
Most definitely, and thank you for taking the time out to come on the show and explain what's going on to the family. One of the things that I would like to say, over the past 3 years of being on this radio show, we're constantly being asked the question, what can we do? You know, the beast is too strong. What can we do? And today, we've answered that question, and we've made every single person listening know how they can do and how they can win right now. And if they don't want to, it's on their heads. But this is what we can do to make a difference to our existence and our children's existence to come, and our ancestors, because through us they will live again. You know, and this is what the brother means when he says we have to do it for our ancestors, because through us they will live again. You know? So I would like to take the moment to say that, you know, that now there's an answer to that question that people have been constantly asking, because over the years we've been saying study, research, okay? But on that note, Ambassador, thank you for coming online, and we look forward to having you again on the Breaking the Spell show with the family.
Which we will be arranging.
Which we will definitely be arranging with you to come back on.
So
thank you.
Once again, I'll make the recording of this show available for you this evening. I'll send you a link so you can download it. It can be added to the various sites. I'd like to thank you for myself, because I know we're up early in the morning, late evenings to get this arranged. It's been a great show. It was a pleasure to be a part of the show. Also in the process of, you know, setting the show up and getting everything in place. As I say again, we will